Thanks everyone for being here for this really important event to learn about this really important law that is coming up in terms of when you need to be in compliance. I am Kate Toth, the Executive Director of Bricks and Mortals. We are a nonprofit membership organization based in New York City. Our mission is to empower faith-based organizations to maximize their property and mission. So this law falls right into that. Last year, we had a couple of events, 2 events on Local Law 97. This is going to be a really, really helpful update as we'll get into. So at this point, I'll hand it off to Meta, who was on Bricks and Mortals Board of Directors. She is also an architect and urban designer with the Collective for Community, Culture, and the Environment.
Hi, welcome everyone. This is going to be an exciting event where we're really going to learn a lot. We're very honored to have 2 very important professionals from the New York City Accelerator with us, Ayeesha Ali and Laura Piraino, who is a finance specialist, and Ayeesha, who is an account manager. And we're also honored to have Amy Schwach, Executive Director of the Temple Sharai Tefillah. So could you please, each of you, tell the audience a little bit about yourself in about 2 or 3 sentences? Thank you.
Sure.
Ayeesha?
Yeah, so I'll start. Thank you so much for the introduction. My name is Ayeesha, and I'm an account manager. I work primarily with houses of worship as well as other buildings. I've been working for NYC Accelerator for about a 1.5 years now. So I have a bit of experience working with all different types of buildings. And yeah, I'm really passionate about working with houses of worship.
Thank you.
So
Amy?
then I'll go next on the House of Worship segue. My name is Amy Schwach. I'm the Executive Director of Temple Sharai Tefillah on the Upper East Side. And our congregation has been working for the past several months to try to get in compliance with Local Law 97. And I thank Ayeesha because she's been on all of the webinars that have been helping us. And I really appreciate being part of this group today. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura?
Yes. Hi, good morning. My name is Laura Piraino. I'm with the New York City Accelerator, actually both as an account manager and financing specialist. So I have the pleasure to work with all different building types to help them through the process from start to finish, which has been a joy. I've been in this sustainability space for over 20 years. So nice to be here. Thank you.
Great. So let's get going, and we will start with Ayeesha, then we'll hear from Amy, and then we'll conclude with Laura, and after that, we'll hear your questions. Okay? Ayeesha, take it away.
Sounds great. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So like I said before, my name is Ayeesha. I'm an account manager for NYC Accelerator. And today I will be going over what Local Law 97 is and what the requirements are for houses of faith. So another quick agenda of our presentation, an introduction to NYC Accelerator, what exactly Local Law 97 is, the different compliance pathways for houses of worship, some low to no cost energy saving opportunities, incentives, and financing, and then we will address any questions you have at the end. Next slide, please. So what is NYC Accelerator? NYC Accelerator is a free city program that helps control costs, meet compliance requirements for local laws, boost building performance, and increase energy savings, all to reduce carbon emissions across New York City buildings. We provide free technical guidance, help identify any building upgrade projects. If you have any pain points in your building, we can help you address them. And we'll connect you with service providers that can implement decarbonization projects. We also have a free training center that you can sign up for, and there we have an abundance of trainings, whether it be heat pumps or anything else that may interest you. We also have financing specialists on board like Laura that can help identify applicable financial incentives or help you walk through the financing process. Next slide, please. So who is eligible for our program? Any building over 5,000 square feet. Smaller buildings are referred to partner organizations, but we still work with buildings as long as you're over 5,000 square feet. Feel free to contact us. And even if you're not sure what your square footage is, you can let us know and we'll check that for you. So you can either call us, you can visit our website. We have a chat feature on our website as well. And we have a building energy snapshot tool that you can use to see the current state of your building. There's no catch, no cost or commitment at all. We're just here to offer you some free advice about reducing the energy consumption of your building and identifying any incentives that you can take advantage of. And you can meet with us as many times as you'd like. Next slide, please. Okay, next we can dive into Local Law 97. So some background, Local Law 97 is part of the Climate Mobilization Act, which was the largest climate solution put forth by any city in the world. It is made up of a slate of climate laws that were created to dramatically reduce the carbon emissions across New York City. And central to the Climate Mobilization Act is Local Law 97. Next slide, please. So here are a few local laws that you may or may not have heard of. Local Law 84 is the benchmarking law, which is the annual submission of your energy usage and water usage data. Local Law 95 are the letter ratings that you may have seen when you're walking around. That's based off of your benchmarking grade. And Local Law 87 deals with energy audits and retro commissioning. So buildings over 50,000 square feet are required to submit an ASHRAE Level 2 audit every 10 years. And retro commissioning just means to make sure that your building is up to code and everything, all the systems are working as they should be. Local Law 97 is for buildings that are over 25,000 square feet, and it limits buildings' carbon emissions. Next slide, please. So here's a map of Local Law 97 covered buildings. As you can see, they are concentrated in Manhattan, but it's scattered all throughout 5 boroughs. So the outer boroughs have buildings that are covered as well. So I do recommend that you can reach out to us so we can double check if your building is either on the list or if you have to comply. Here is an example. We use your building block and lot number to look up whether or not you're on the covered buildings list. Next slide, please. So diving a little bit deeper into Local Law 97, as I said before, buildings over 25,000 square feet will be required to meet ambitious carbon reduction targets. So the first carbon emissions limit will be applied from 2024 to 2029, which is the range that we're in right now. And the second carbon emissions limit will be applied from 2030 to 2034. Now, under the current existing conditions, 75 to 80% of the properties that are over 25,000 square feet meet the 2024 to 2029 Local Law 97 limits, but that drops dramatically after 2030 to where 25 to 30% of the properties meet the 2030 to 2034 Local Law 97 limits. So even if you don't have penalties currently, I do recommend that you reach out just so you can form a decarbonization plan, form a plan for your building, just start thinking about what you can do to make your building more energy efficient. The goal of this law is to reduce the emissions produced by the city's largest buildings by 40% by 2030, and the goal is to get to net zero by 2050. Next slide, please. So here are some covered buildings lists that the Department of Buildings has released. So when the buildings on a BBL, and by the way, BBL stands for building, block, and lot number, together meet 50,000 square feet, all of the buildings on that BBL are subject to Local Law 97. However, each building on that BBL must comply with the appropriate requirements for that building. So there are a few covered buildings lists. There's one for Local Law 97, Article 321, which refers to the other pathway that you may take because houses of worship have different options. And there's one for delayed compliance as well. Now, all of these lists are publicly available. You can go onto the Department of Buildings website and look it up for yourself, or you can reach out to us and we can look up your buildings for you. Next slide, please. So houses of worship have the option of two different pathways. There's the prescriptive pathway and the performance pathway. For the prescriptive pathway, you would install applicable prescriptive energy conservation measures by the end of this year, December 31st, 2024. For the performance pathway, you demonstrate your building emissions are below the 2030 Local Law 97 limit by the same time, end of this year, December 31st, 2024. However, for both pathways, you are required to submit an energy compliant buildings report that's either certified by a retro-commissioning agent or a registered design professional. A registered design professional can be defined as either a licensed engineer or an architect. And that report is due May 1st, 2025. Next slide, please. So here is a visual that I think will be helpful for understanding what exactly you would need to do if you choose to go towards the performance pathway. I chose a random building, but as you can see that there are 3 different rows: the penalty, threshold, and emissions. If you do choose to go towards the performance pathway, this building as an example, their emissions are 396, so it's above their threshold. You can see that that's why they have a penalties of approximately $11,000. And all of this data is based off of their benchmarking data it may be from 2022. So you submit that every year to the city on May 1st as well. So in order to reduce your penalties to 0, the goal is to get your emissions below the threshold, so under 355 for this building. Now you can see it dramatically decreases from 2030 to 2034 to 176, and then it continues to decrease up until it reaches 0 in 2050. That's why the penalties keep increasing. So you'd have to continuously reach the threshold or get below the threshold. Now I also circled the area or the square footage of the building, the red circle that you see on the left, because that has an impact on your penalties. So you want to make sure that the square footage for your building is accurate. You can also see the utility inputs on the left. There's electricity, natural gas, and fuel oil number 4. This building is using fuel oil number 4, so that may also be a reason that it has penalties so early on from 2024 to 2029. So if this building were to reduce their oil consumption to 0, that would have a dramatic effect on their penalties. Next slide, please. There's also the prescriptive pathway, which most houses of worship are going towards. Now, again, the choice is completely up to you, whatever you choose, but the prescriptive measures are a one and done type of scenario so far, as DOB has stated, for this compliance period. So here are a list of the measures. There are 13 prescriptive measures, and 9 of the prescriptive measures require attestations. We can go through them right now just to see, there are some that you may have already been working on while maintaining your building. Things like maintaining the heating system, repairing all the heating system leaks, insulating all pipes, heating and or hot water, insulating steam system condensate or water tanks, upgrading your lighting, weatherizing or air sealing, installing timers on exhaust fans. And 4 of the highlighted measures here require detailed inspection because of the higher energy consumption. The 4 highlighted measures include repairing steam traps, installing indoor or outdoor heating systems, sensors, and boiler controls. Next slide, please. So this is a prescriptive pathway or Article 321 filing guide that the Department of Buildings has recently released. As you can see, this is one of the prescriptive measures, and it goes into why it's necessary, the requirements for that measure, and it shows you the minimum set points as well. So it goes into detail on what you would need to do for each measure, which is super helpful. So I recommend that you go through that guide if you do choose to go towards the prescriptive pathway. If an owner of a property is subject to Article 321 and does choose the prescriptive pathway rather than the 2030 emissions limit path or the performance pathway, then they must complete all of the PECMs that apply to them by the end of 2024. And PECMs just stands for the Prescriptive Energy Conservation Measures. Next slide, please. This, I think, is a very helpful visual on, depending on the heating system of your building, you can see which measures apply to you. So you can see that not all measures apply to you. You may have already been working on some, or if you have a one-pipe steam system, then you don't need to worry about radiator temperature controls, steam traps. If you currently have heat pumps as your primary heating system in the building, you don't have to worry about water tank insulation or master steam system venting. So it just depends on your building. It's very personal to your building's heating system. Next slide, please. Here are a few penalty mitigation opportunities. So the first one is an unexpected or unforeseen event. This is something like flooding, hurricanes, fire, anything of that sort. If for whatever reason that happens to your building and you have evidence, you can submit those photos to Department of Buildings, DOB, and you have the opportunity for your penalty mitigation. The eligible energy conservation project is more for affordable housing buildings, so I'm going to skip over that, but the mediated resolution does apply. So the mediated resolution is essentially going into a contract with Department of Buildings. Let's say 10 of the measures apply to you and you're able to do 5, but you've done 5 in good effort, you've made a good faith effort to do all 5, and you have a plan set in place for when you're going to complete the other 5. You can go into a contract with DOB and decide maybe you'll finish all 10 measures by the end of 2025 or whatever you both decide upon. And if for whatever reason you're not able to do so, then DOB has full authority to reissue the penalties back onto the property. Now, 2 things I do want to note: that there is a $10,000 penalty for a failure to submit the building's emissions report. So I just want to highlight that is due on May 1st, 2025, and to submit that when you can. And there's also a failure to choose either compliance option. There's a penalty of $10,000 for a failure to meet either compliance option. So those are just 2 penalties to keep in mind that have a penalty of $10,000 for each. Next slide, please. Here's also a helpful timeline. We are in 2024 where the emissions limits begin. And by the end of 2025, that's the prescriptive path deadline, as well as the performance path deadline, December 31st, 2024. The first compliance report is due May 1st, 2025, and these are important deadlines to remember. Next slide, please. So these are the same dates that I highlighted earlier, but just to let you know, these are important as for the deadlines that I mentioned earlier. And for the building's emissions report, that can only be submitted by either a registered design professional or a retro commissioning agent. So let's say you have multiple occupancy groups on a site. That's common for houses of worship. You may have a preschool or a daycare. In order to go towards the prescriptive pathway or be eligible for it, 50% or more of your building must be classified as A-3 house of worship. I recommend double checking that with either the registered design professional or retro commissioning agent to see what your building is categorized and that it is indeed 50% or more. If you do have other questions on this, I pasted DOB's email address here, ghgemissions@buildings.nyc.gov. Next slide, please. So just to recap everything that we mentioned, houses of faith larger than 25,000 square feet must comply with Local Law 97 by the end of 2024, with either pathway that you choose, either installing the prescriptive measures that apply to you and then verifying with the retro commissioning agent, or getting underneath your emissions limit for the performance pathway. Same thing by the end of 2024, and you would verify that with the registered design professional. The Local Law 97 prescriptive measures include the installation of insulation sensors, control of HVAC equipment, as well as other energy efficiency measures. Houses of faith smaller than 25,000 square feet do not have to comply with Local Law 97. However, small houses of faith are encouraged to reach out to us as well, because the city does offer technical and financial guidance. Buildings of all sizes can retrofit and climate proof their buildings, and we can help you do so. There are incentives in place as well, so we do encourage you to reach out. Thank you so much. That's it for me.
All right. Thank you, Ayeesha. This was super helpful. So moving right along, I think we should move on to Amy,
Sure.
who can tell us how her synagogue has successfully updated their property to be in compliance with Local Law 97. Amy,
Thank you. Thank
take
you
it
so
away.
much. Thank you. And thanks, Ayeesha. That's super helpful. I did want to also mention that if you have access to your certificate of occupancy, it'll give you the designation. If you're looking for the A-3 designation for houses of worship, it would be on your certificate of occupancy. And if you're not able to access that, you can certainly get that from the Department of Buildings. So our congregation, if you wouldn't mind the next slide, our congregation chose to go the prescriptive pathway. This is a picture of our sanctuary and many of our congregants celebrating the holidays. Part of the original plan was to start with retrograde the lighting, retrofitting all of our lighting, which we had already started doing. The lighting was, this is a building from the 1950s. It was originally a movie theater. And so we had a lot of work to do. This is the exterior of the building on 79th Street and 2nd Avenue. And so we started with the lighting. So we retrofitted the lighting on all of our floors. We have 4 floors and a roof. And we have a daycare, a nursery school, and a religious school. And so we decided, like I said, to go the prescriptive pathway, which meant that we had the list of 13 tasks that we had to get done. Next slide, please. Yep, more good stuff. That's our social hall. You'll see the lights on the side. The lights on the side of this actually used to be neon, if you can believe. They were installed as neon because it was a nicer looking light. We had to retrofit all of the lights in the entire building. And those we started with the ground floor, which is our social hall. Next slide, please. That's one of our offices. Again, we had to retrofit the lights. That was a big job. We took down the ceiling and replaced the ceiling tiles and replaced the lighting along with it. But again, that's an older building and those things needed to be done. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is more of the meat of the prescriptive pathway measures. The radiator thermostat control, there's a couple different kinds, steam traps, the thermostat control for heating and cooling, which I'm sure looks familiar to everybody. The other stuff may be less familiar if you're not regularly working around your building. Installing the heat trap or bleeder, the heat and hot water for the boiler. Next slide, please. So just so you're aware, thank you. What I think my best advice is don't get overwhelmed by this list. I was very overwhelmed by this list when I first saw it. I wasn't sure if it applied to us, and I said, no, we're a nonprofit. We don't have to worry about these things, right? And so more and more, I was on webinars and I spoke to Ayeesha, who was super helpful, and she explained this situation and part of what you saw here. Again, don't get overwhelmed by this list. Take it one step at a time. In many cases, you've probably done most of these things already, and you don't have as much work to do as you think. Just like Ayeesha said, if the lighting you're working on, I am sure that you're all working on keeping leaks from happening in your heating system. A lot of this is regular maintenance, and there are a few things that have to get done that aren't part of regular maintenance. And so we've been working with our staff and vendors to make sure that everything gets done, and that we can be done and in compliance with all of the guidelines. That being said, you should, if you have staff that you can count on, building staff, please partner with them. They are the biggest help in getting these things taken care of. And you should absolutely have vendors that you trust, that you work with, to come in and give you proposals for work that has to get done if it isn't already. But I would be happy to help anybody if they have help, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. This was a very big learning experience for me and for my congregation in terms of these smaller details around the building and things that needed to be done. but I am very proud to say that we are just about finished with all of them.
Wonderful. So thank you, Amy. We will be taking questions at the end of the overall presentation. So let's now move on to Laura's talk. Laura?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. To build on what Ayeesha mentioned, reaching out to the New York City Accelerator, you're going to receive a dedicated account manager who's going to become familiar with your building and your needs. And they're going to guide you through what opportunities you have to save energy if your building is less than 25,000 square feet, which means that's going to impact your operating costs, right? So this is a conversation that's a great conversation to begin at any time. And if your building is over 25,000 square feet, contact us and we'll help you navigate these different choices for compliance with Local Law 97. But there are resources available, and that's what I'm going to review this morning. Next slide, please. So there are a number of incentives available to houses of worship. If you're at the beginning of the stage and you need to identify where those opportunities are to save energy, there's a fantastic NYSERDA incentive called the Green Jobs, Green New York Energy Audit. And this is a thorough review of the mechanical and electrical system, the energy usage and the analysis of that. So where is energy being used in the building? Where are there opportunities to save energy? A detailed list of recommended measures, the savings that you would get, both the cost savings and the payback if you installed those measures. And this is something that the state is subsidizing. So it would normally cost thousands of dollars to get this kind of analysis, but it's just a few $100s, and we can help you apply for that program. House of Worship incentives also include the small, medium business or commercial and industrial incentives. These are both available through Con Ed and National Grid, and I'll talk a little bit more about those. There's also a Con Ed instant lighting rebate program, which is through participating providers. And I'll talk about all of these in more detail in a moment. The NYSERDA Clean Heat Program, which is an incentive which can actually be combined or stacked, as they say, with other incentives. And this is for heat pumps and electrification measures in the building. And there's the New York Sun Solar Program, which is an incentive for solar photovoltaic panels. Next slide, please. So just when you're starting to navigate incentives, there's some lots of lessons learned. One is that they change throughout the year. There are bonus offers, limited time offers, adders, which an adder is if you complete the measures that are required in the incentive package and you add on another energy conservation measure, you can get even more of an incentive for that. Some incentives are very neighborhood specific and of course building type specific. So there are different programs for multifamily, new construction. And when you're starting to navigate these, you may go on the utility websites and mistakenly contact the program manager who's overseeing a multifamily program. Actually, houses of worship don't take advantage of those. It's a different one. It's for small, medium business and commercial and industrial. When you're trying to figure out these incentives, they're actually calculated differently. Some of them are calculated by the amount of energy saved per kilowatt hour or BTU. Sometimes they're a set amount for the project measure. It might be per unit or even per foot in terms of insulation. This year, we've seen some really generous incentives. So if you're really considering this, energy upgrades this year, it's a great time to take advantage of these incentives, whether your building is 25,000 square feet or more or less, because they're available to you regardless. These are different. Incentives are designed to pay for part of the energy upgrade. A grant is different. That's an amount of money that you're given for a project. Rebates and tax incentives and abatements work a little differently. Generally, these incentives are taken through the contractors, not all, but most. So you really have to work closely with your building staff and with the participating provider. And one thing that the New York City Accelerator has that's really useful to navigate this is if you're interested in an energy upgrade, and you want to take advantage of a certain incentive, we have a service provider list, and you can actually search them by incentive program to make sure they're participating in that program. Ayeesha and I have encountered a number of instances where folks were not aware that their contractor had to be a participating provider, and they didn't get the incentive. They missed out. So that's something to be aware of, and make sure you find out if they're participating in that program. Next slide, please. So for houses of worship, you have 2 different programs that you're eligible for. It really depends on what the peak demand is on a rolling 12-month basis in your house of worship in your building. You're eligible for either the small, medium business or the commercial and industrial program. And your building staff can help you determine, or you can send us the utility bills and we can help you figure that out. Why this is important is that if you're below 100 kilowatt hours peak demand, you'll be eligible for the small, medium, and business program. If it's over 300 kilowatt hour peak demand, it's the commercial and industrial. And if you're between 100 and 300 kilowatt hours, you can actually choose, which is great because they have different incentives. So one may be a better choice for you, say if you're going to complete the lighting. Another may be a good choice for you, depending on the specific HVAC upgrades you choose. So that's something that you want to work with your participating contractor and your building staff. Now, this is very important to receive this incentive. You need preliminary approval. You have to submit the paperwork, and they do come out and do a pre-inspection, and you'll receive a letter to proceed before you start work. You want to make sure that you follow these steps. Again, this is another lesson learned, that we've had accounts where they started the work, the contractor, was on a timetable, but unfortunately they missed out on this incentive. There'll be a post-inspection. And then for certain different incentives here, the paperwork needs to be submitted by November 15th to get that guaranteed rate for 2024. Now, if you have multi-year projects and you're doing a big major upgrade in the building, they'll probably designate a business development manager, and then you'll be on a little bit different timeline with those projects, but they would assign you one. And there are some incentives, as I mentioned, that, and this is just an example of, there are bonus incentives right now, and the incentives are going to change throughout the year. For example, one of the prescriptive commercial and industrial lighting measures is going to end at the end of April. Others will be available, but it's just an example of how these things change throughout the year. Next slide, please. So these are commercial and industrial energy efficiency eligible measures under this program. And as you can see, these are measures that align with the prescriptive pathway. So there's incentives available for these things. Lighting, for example, you have to upgrade your lighting, your common area lighting, and LED fixtures have an incentive. The tune-up, the boiler tune-up, and steam traps. Steam traps actually have to be maintained and replaced on a regular basis. It's really part of routine maintenance if you have that type of system. So these are just some examples of some of the incentives that Con Edison has available, and National Grid as well. Next slide, please. So this is the Con Ed Instant Lighting Incentive Program. And if you're just getting started with energy conservation, LED lighting it's really a low-hanging fruit, generally has a pretty quick payback compared to some other measures. But this is another example. You need to use a participating contractor, and they'll work with you to identify the lighting needs in your building. And then you receive the discount instantly when you make the purchase. So they call this a rebate program rather than a strict incentive. Next slide, please. So the Clean Heat program is extremely generous right now in 2024. This is a NYSERDA state incentive for a variety of different types of heat pumps. And we can help navigate heat pump selection that would work for your type of building. There are quite a few different types, and there are cold climate heat pumps that are much different than they were years ago that really serve your needs, save a lot of energy. This incentive for small, medium, and business is capped at $200K or 50% of the project costs. And for C&I, it's capped at $1 million. The good news is this particular incentive can be combined with other incentives while you're doing your upgrades. So you can really reduce the cost overall. Next slide, please. So this is something brand new that we want to bring to your attention. This is called the direct pay, and usually houses of worship wouldn't get a tax credit, right? Because you're tax exempt, but actually you have a tax ID number. Everyone who has a BBL actually does have one. And this is a new tax credit for clean energy projects. And there are quite a few steps to follow to take advantage of this. And our solar team will help you walk through that. We offer free of charge solar feasibility studies. They'll ascertain whether your building is a good candidate for solar or not, and then do some analysis of all of the tax incentives and other incentives available to you for a solar project. And they'll walk you through guiding you through this process, because there's a pre-filing registration and so on and so forth to claim the credit. And there are quite a few number of forms, and they can help you do that. Next slide, please. So this is a sample of how a house of worship can take advantage of incentives for a solar project. Get this free solar feasibility study from the New York City Accelerator. Your account manager will introduce you to the solar team. And even if you're not considering this for this year, it's free analysis. It's great information to give you an idea of what kind of costs a solar project would entail. You also have the New York Sun rebate program, which is it's $1 per watt amount that the solar installer files for themselves. And they're actually paid directly from NYSERDA, which lowers the cost of that upfront system. And I'll talk a bit more about this for financing. We have specialty financing for solar installation. and other electrification projects through quite a few lenders. And the cost of that can be rolled into the cost of a new roof, if you need a new roof, is considered part of a solar project with lenders. And you can roll the costs into financing for that. And then you'd receive the direct pay federal tax credit. Next slide, please. So why finance energy upgrades? So this is an important consideration with capital planning. So it eliminates the need for upfront funding to get these upgrades completed. You can address both the local law 97 requirements, but also longer term projects. And most importantly, you're preserving your building reserves, right? Building reserves are usually for emergencies and expenditures, and you want to, you may consider leaving those and using a financing option instead for these energy upgrades. And so when you do that, if you're reducing the energy use in the building considerably, the payment to repay the financing may actually result in a lower amount than the energy, if you save enough energy, the cost may actually be lower in the end than the financing payment. So for example, if you're reducing your operating costs by $5,000 a month, but your payment on the loan is only $4,000, you'll have a net cash flow of $1,000. Next slide, please. So the financing assistance available, we have a financing team that will meet with you. We're going to learn about your needs, your specific projects, and then try and determine the best financing based on the use of the building, your mortgage cycle, the different types of reserves and other finances of your particular organization and building. And we'll meet with each of you and connect you to capital providers and lenders. We'll engage the stakeholders in the process. You can invite as many people as you like to these meetings. We'll explain the various different options that you have, which I'll review some opportunities we have this year. And then we offer guidance in assessing those options. So we'll review term sheets, we'll review different opportunities. If one lender doesn't work out and you'd like to meet with another, we can certainly arrange to do that. Next slide, please. So one thing that the finance team will try to assess is, where are you with your mortgage? What's the loan status? And for houses of worship, you may not have a mortgage, and that's great news. But if you do, we're going to try and figure out where you are in that cycle. Most buildings that we engage are somewhere in a mid-cycle, so that there are very specific type of financing products for the mid-cycle. And I'll review some of these in the next slides. Next slide, please. So one thing that you can do if you're ready to refinance a mortgage and it's coming due, there are green mortgages. And so you can take out a loan that also covers the energy efficient improvements. And that can be a very attractive opportunity depending on your mortgage lender. There are also equipment loans that are offered by third-party lenders and equipment manufacturers. There are also equipment leases, and that's allowing the building owners to use these energy efficiency or renewable energy equipment without purchase, without any upfront costs. Next slide, please. There are also non-debt financing solutions. You'll often see these referred to as turnkey solutions. There are energy service agreements, and that's a contract between you and an energy service company called an ESCO. And they'll construct and install usually solar, but other equipment in the building, which offers an option if you really have no cash, no resources. This is an option to install that type of array or project. There's also something called a power purchasing agreement, which is an option. It's a third-party project developer, and they'll come and install an on-site, usually solar array in the cities. And this will include financing, incentives, and permits, and it's no upfront cost as well. Now, these options are an opportunity. Something that we always recommend is to find out what interest rate and what the specific terms are for these products. Next slide, please. Also, houses of worship are eligible for PACE financing. As I mentioned before, you actually do have a tax ID number, and PACE financing is actually a program. It refers to property assessed clean energy financing. And so it allows you to borrow money, and it's repaid as a line item on a property tax bill. So right now you don't receive one, but you would should you decide to try to secure PACE financing. And we have over a dozen PACE lenders. These are really for large upgrade projects. This is something that, at a minimum, $500,000 to $1 million is what the loan size that they're requesting. And mortgage lender consent is required, but in many houses of worship, you don't have a mortgage lender. So it may be a really good option for you. This is financing that can go out 20 years, or the useful life of the equipment, the expected useful life of the equipment. And there are some other requirements, but if you're interested in PACE financing, please do contact us, and we'll introduce you to those lenders. Next slide, please. Some other financing options that we have this year, and one is NYC. This is the state, essentially the state green bank. They have quite a few energy efficiency and clean energy financing products, generally below market rate. These loans will go up to 15 years and include pre-development loans. So if you need a loan prior to your energy upgrades being started, they include pre-development loans. They're also referred to as bridge loans. So NYC is one. Inclusive Prosperity Capital, they offer a catalyst loan, and they have terms up to 20 years to finance energy efficiency and clean energy projects. NYC really is looking for energy efficiency and clean energy electrification projects, but Inclusive Prosperity Capital, or IPC, will also finance up to 25% of health and safety measures. So that's a good option if you need to do a bit of both, but they have to be, the majority of the upgrade has to be energy efficiency or clean energy. Verdant Capital is also another financing option. There's a Con Ed and National Grid subsidy program, and these are subsidized loans, and they're target interest rates. So the reason why I say that is that the interest rate is calculated based on the incentive supplied and the work being done. And so Con Ed and National Grid offer Verdant Capital an opportunity to bring the interest rate down, but it's only for projects that have incentives applied already. So you will have had to work out the scope of work, applied for the incentives, and then contact Verdant Capital. So the target rates actually start at 0% for 24 months and go up to there. And you can get this up to 84 months. Next slide, please. So what are your next steps? So whether you're looking to comply with Local Law 97, or if you're interested in reducing your operating costs and energy use in the building, you contact the New York City Accelerator, and they'll help you understand what benchmarking is and what your compliance requirements are. They'll help you prioritize the energy upgrades in your building and confirm eligibility for those incentives that I had mentioned. You can utilize that service provider network, and we can introduce you to those companies that are in that network. And then meet with the financing team, and we'll introduce you to lenders of your choice. And all of this allows you to make an informed decision, right, about your capital improvements moving forward. And with that, I want to thank you for your time and bring it back to Maida.
Maida, I think you're muted.
Thank you so much for these wonderful and informative presentations. I think this will really help everyone here in the audience and the entire Bricks and Mortals membership. So I think that we went through the presentations at a fairly rapid pace, so we have a little bit more time for questions. And I encourage the audience right now to really put your most burning questions into the Q&A box. And while I do that, I wanted to start with a question that I've heard a lot, which is about the size of the building, right? And you are essentially saying that the building has to be larger than 25,000 square feet. Now, what if the House of Faith actually also includes, let's say, classrooms and sort of non-religious uses? What is the best way of figuring out, you know, if the building applies? And can you explain one more time what this A-3 religious designation means?
Sure. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here and for all the questions. We really appreciate you giving us the time to speak today. So it depends on, so a lot of houses of worship, like we mentioned before, have multiple occupancy types. When it comes to a daycare, maybe a pre-K, it'll be attached to the building. So what that A-3 50% or more rule basically states is, in order for you to be eligible for the prescriptive pathway, your building has to be designated as 50% or more usage for house of worship. So if it's 30,000 square feet and only 5% is a house of worship and the rest is used for a daycare, then you would not be eligible. But I do encourage you to just double check with the retro commissioning agent. And then also Amy mentioned you can check the building usage as well in a Department of Buildings document.
That is really, really helpful. And what if the House of Faith is actually not only one building, but multiple buildings on one site? And let's say one of them is a sanctuary and another one is, let's say, a more educational facility or a, you know, social hall, right? So how would you address that?
So for that, 2 points, it depends on, let's say there's 2-3 buildings on the lot. It depends on the square footage for each of the buildings, and if either of those are over 25,000 square feet, then they would be subject, or if together they're more than 50,000 square feet, they would be subject. And then also the primary use of each building. So if one is used as a house of worship and it is 50% or more, then you can go towards the prescriptive pathway. But again, either way, you have the option. If you are eligible for the prescriptive, you can choose to go the performance as well. And if the other building is not 50% or more, then you would only be subject to the performance pathway. Laura, if you have anything to add, feel free to jump in.
No, I think that was pretty complete.
Those were my questions. Let's now go to the audience questions. And okay, I believe the second question we've already answered. Are churches less than 25,000 square feet exempt? And the answer is yes. Okay, so an anonymous attendee is asking, if a property is sharing a boiler with a house of faith, how are those emissions counted against the property? Is the other property also qualified under section 321 as opposed to 320, since the boiler is shared? Does it matter whether the boiler is located on the house of faith tax lot or the other properties? This is a pretty tough question here.
Yeah. So for that, I would recommend one, contact us because we would look into your benchmarking data. And then we would also have to see, okay, if there's any way to split that. There's also the Department of Buildings email, the ghd.emissions that I have in my presentation as well. But that's more of a personalized, we'd have to definitely look more into that building itself. So I would recommend to contact us for that. And then we can do, the example that I showed for the performance pathway, we could look into it further to see how the heating system works.
So
Yeah, and I just wanted to sort of add to what Ayeesha said. So there are quite a few websites that you can reference for the square footage of your property. One is called Zola, and it's the Department of Planning website. So they're going to look at the square footage of your BBL. It may be calculated a little differently than the Department of Taxation, right? Because the Department of Taxation is assessing the square footage based on taxable space of occupancy. So sometimes you might see a bit of a discrepancy, and Ayeesha is absolutely right. We would have to look at data across both the benchmarking requirements, which are also submitted differently. So we're going to analyze each individual property, each individual account, and look across all of these data sets to determine exactly how this will be calculated. And we are in touch with the DOB on a regular basis, and we can, if there's any question that we can't answer, we will pose it to them and get an answer for you.
great, thank you. So we have another question here. Do you assist with converting heating systems to a more efficient source to comply with some of the measures that you have discussed? Ayeesha?
Yes, we do. It depends on what you want to do. There are also, like Laura mentioned, there are a bunch of state incentives for if you're leaning towards heat pumps currently, if you're leaning towards electrification. It depends on how exactly you'd like to switch over to what heating system you'd like to switch over to. Maybe it's just like a higher efficiency boiler. But either way, there are incentives in place for whichever, and we recommend, you can contact us, and then we want to make sure that you are aware of the incentives, because if for whatever reason you do the project without being aware, there's not really any way to get the rebates after if you've already done the work. So yeah, you can contact us, and there are incentives available to do that.
Yeah,
Great,
and just to add to that as well, a really good energy audit. Like I mentioned, the Green Jobs, Green New York audit will look at your HVAC system and make some recommendations. And as Ayeesha said, there are condensing boilers, which are run on natural gas, that are much more efficient than many of the older models. There's electrification opportunities. We can help you navigate those. And there are a lot of building assessments. I just want to mention that we've run across some of these building assessments may not actually be energy audits. I've seen them where it just really described the HVAC system in the building and how it's currently operating without very specific recommendations, but there was no building envelope information in the report at all. So that's one kind of assessment, but very helpful, right? Very useful. Another assessment that we've seen is the Local Law 97 assessment, and there are some companies offering that. Now, find out if it's actually a real energy audit. It probably isn't. If it's just an assessment, they're going to look at those 13 prescriptive measures and decide where you are. And the ones that, as Ayeesha mentioned, these are a lot of these are maintenance measures, they're efficiency measures that you'd be doing anyway in the building. They're not a huge capital expenditure, but they may only limit that assessment to those things. You can ask them to include in the report, can you look at our building and given us an assessment of the 13 measures if we want to take the prescriptive pathway, or if we want to take the performance pathway, can you also include that so we can compare? And then, of course, contact us and we can give you a list of questions for them to include in their report.
Wow, that's very, very helpful. Thank you. So let's move on to another question. Mary Folke is asking if the solar consultation includes strategies for meeting landmark requirements. And this is very near and dear to houses of faith, many of which are landmarked. So can you cover that even a little bit more broadly than this particular solar question? Because, landmark restrictions, for example, on landmarked windows would, hinder some energy measures. So please, can you go on and elaborate on that a little bit in addition to the solar question?
Yeah, so there are different types of solar panels. So during the solar consult, that's something that our Solar One team or solar specialists definitely address. So if it is a landmark building, they wouldn't look at maybe regular solar panels. So they could make it so, I know for a lot of landmark buildings, you want it so it's not visible from the street. So they would take that into consideration when they are doing their assessment.
Yeah, and to just add to that, there are a lot of products out there that improve the efficiency of things like windows without full replacement, that keeps the complete facade and exterior of the building intact. So I would recommend to contact us and we can review some of those opportunities. We are aware of landmark status in buildings and some of the restrictions. And as Ayeesha mentioned, same thing with heat pumps, right? In some buildings, you need to put a heat pump on the roof. That may not be a good option for you. Maybe you have a basement space. Maybe there are other types of heat pumps that don't need a huge unit on the roof. And again, there are lots of options now for these kinds of technologies, and we'll help you find the right one for your building.
So, but just to be clear, we're not seeing a weakening of the landmark laws. The landmark laws still apply to the building at the same time as Local Law 97, correct? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so let's move on to the next question from Pastor Timothy Mitchell. If the parsonage, a one-family house, is part of the BBL, which is the block and lot, with a house of worship, how does this affect the Local Law 97 square foot calculation and energy calculation?
I would say, again, we would look into your benchmarking data if that does. Sometimes when we look into your benchmarking data, it will say if it's categorized as a worship facility, and more often than not, if the parsonage depends on the square footage of the parsonage, different building usage types are calculated differently, like their emissions are calculated differently. So it just depends. Same thing, I would recommend reaching out to us, but the square footage and the building usage type both have an impact on Local Law 97.
Great. So we have another question about sharing this presentation. The question is, will this be publicly available on the Bricks and Mortals website? And I already know that it will be. And the other question is can the presentation slides be emailed to houses of faith? So maybe Kate can answer that.
Yeah, so I've been trying to answer folks in the chat saying, yes, it will be. So after this, we'll be sending out this presentation and the slide deck to everyone that registered with the email addresses that you registered from. And then it'll also be on our website for anyone that wants to see it that might have or have not registered as well.
Thank you for that. So we have a question from the Bronx from Lynette Hayes. Do houses of worship in the Bronx have to be in compliance at this time? Our zip code is 10452. Yes.
New York City.
We all know this is New York City.
New
Okay.
York City.
So this is a city legislation. So we have another question about a group who's wondering if they're planning a development for the property, how should they proceed?
Okay, so we do have an account manager that can help when it comes to newer buildings. They can help you with the planning process to make sure not only is your building built sustainably, but it's built up to code, and so that it won't have to face any penalties for any of the future compliance periods for local law 97, at least not any of the ones that are coming up. So we can give you their email address.
I
Yeah,
just want to
just
say
to-
one thing, if you don't mind, I just want to say, understanding the systems in your building is really crucial, and understanding what the opportunities are to make them more sustainable. And the Accelerator, New York City, is providing us with this tremendous resource. So we should actually really try to take advantage of that resource, because it's really amazing what we might be able to accomplish, and the resources we can use to be able to do it. If many of our congregations can't afford these measures, which in some cases are extreme, just to be able to address the guidelines, it's just, we should all be able to get the help we need. So thank you.
So next we have a question about financing. How does the tax credit help for an organization that is tax exempt and is not required to pay any taxes? I think, Laura, you went over that already, but maybe you can clarify that a little bit, because it's very hard to sort of put those two things
Sure.
together.
So if you're planning a clean energy project, this tax incentive is available to all taxpayers, right? You're going to get 30% of the project in a tax incentive. So, but houses of worship and nonprofits could not take advantage of that incentive prior to this passing, and this is brand new. So if you go through the process and file with the IRS and follow all of the procedures and the steps with the contractor you're working with, you can claim that tax incentive. For getting a tax ID number to take advantage of the PACE program, that may be helpful to you, because you may want to have your upgrades 100% financed, fully amortized over a long period of time. And instead of having a lien on the property, which a traditional loan may come with, the PACE program is just getting an itemized tax bill. So there are two different reasons why houses of worship may want to look into this. And just call us and we'll help guide you through that.
Okay. There are a couple of questions in the Q&A that talk about like how to contact the Accelerator, and I should remind everyone that this presentation is going to be on the Bricks and Mortals website and emailed to you with all the contact information of the Accelerator. And another related question is about, information on the Accelerator website about Local Law 97. And yes, there is a lot of information about Local Law 97 on the Accelerator website. And of course, you should definitely call them if you have any questions. Ayeesha and Laura, are there other sources of information about Local Law 97, other than, of course, Bricks and Mortals, where, our audience could be directed toward?
Yeah, I would recommend the Department of Buildings website. There's the Article 321 filing guide, which is super helpful. That's part of what I had on one of the slides for my presentations. It has all the details for the prescriptive pathway. There's also the covered buildings list on the Department of Buildings website. If you need help with any with your benchmarking with your local law 84, then the Sustainability Help Center is also a free resource. They have videos. If you have any questions at all, you can contact them as well.
Wow, that's great. We have a little bit more of a detailed question here from Mark Goodwin. He's asking, if my corporation inherits a property which is local law 97 non-compliant, is there a grace period to become compliant?
I would recommend starting now, so then you can build a case for yourself. There is the good faith effort or the mediated resolution, but that works if you are doing your due diligence and maybe developing a decarbonization plan or working to either get below the emissions limit or working on some of the prescriptive pathways. So I think the first step is to see the current state of your building and looking into creating a plan for it. Again, that's something that we can help you with, but that I would consider that to be the first step.
So we have another question from an anonymous attendee here about parking lot rentals. Are parking lot rentals considered other than house of worship use? I assume the question is whether parking lot is considered A3 religious use in a property.
That's actually
Ayeesha.
something I'm not sure about. Yeah, I have to look into that. I will be checking that on the building energy exchange calculator to see if that does if that's categorized as other. But from my knowledge, I don't think it would count in the square footage. I'm not entirely sure. I would have to get back to you on that.
Okay. So we have a very easy question next, which is, what does it cost for the New York City Accelerator to analyze our church property? And actually, is it the accelerator that is analyzing the property? Maybe Ayeesha, you can answer that.
Yeah, that's totally free. All of our services are free. So our first building assessment, we look into the square footage, if there are any discrepancies, look into all of the publicly available data, your benchmarking score, your benchmarking data, see if there are any discrepancies there, try to help you build a plan, and then get you in touch with service providers that can complete any of the identified projects if you have any pain points for your building. And then we can also get you in touch. Laura also works with a lot of houses of worship as well as being on the financing team. So, you'd be assigned to either of us and we can guide you through the entire process. And then, like I said before, it's a completely free, unless you contact any of the service providers, then they would give you a scope of work with the price estimate.
Oh, that's great.
I just want to add too that so there's no confusion. So we don't go to your building. These are online services where we're analyzing your building based on the information that you provide to us. And we may look at your utility bills. We'll look at the type of HVAC system you have, the age of your lighting and roof, and so on, and work with you to help develop a plan. If you're interested in an energy audit, again, the NYSERDA grant, to have take advantage of that, because that's a site assessment that is comprehensive, and that'll give you invaluable data to use moving forward with the planning process for any of these upgrades. And then there used to be a program that was provided from the utilities. There was a site assessment where they may have sent somebody there. That has been discontinued. So that is no longer available. So it's the energy audits, the contractors who offer these assessments. Other organizations may offer that on-site assessment, but we'll be working with you virtually.
So I think there's one final question that I think is on many people's minds right now, which is, before calling the accelerator, what information should be gathered to have a meaningful conversation with Ayeesha or Laura, so that, you know, you can start the process or continue the process?
I think that something that's super helpful is if your building is over 50,000 square feet and subject to local law 87, when you contact us or, you know, if you email us, you can email us with that energy audit. We actually don't, like, you know, we can look up the publicly available data and look at your benchmarking data ourselves with your address, your building block and lot number. But the local law 87 audit does help. We can walk through it together and see which of those measures you'd like to implement, and then either contact service providers. You know, you can review what has the best return on investment. So the ASHRAE level 2 audit, I think, would be helpful.
Great. I also I wanted to ask one final question to Amy about, you know, working with service providers and how that worked for you in terms of, you know, this successful project.
Sure, thank you for asking. We have many vendors that we've been working with for many, many years. Again, this is an older building. It's sometimes hard to find vendors who are willing to work with us. And so we have trusted vendors for many, many years. We sat down, we talked about, I sat down with an architect along with those vendors to talk about this particular, which plan would work for us, which sort of measures we had to follow. And we made a decision to do the prescriptive pathway. Sorry, I always get tripped up. And then we started to literally go down the list of the things that were already done, that we had already worked on, and the things that we had to do. I put a budget together of what it would require to present to my leadership. We put a green team together, as a matter of fact, just as a start to start work on this project. And now that we're at the end, we can actually go on to other things, which is terrific. And I put a budget together to get approved by the leadership to be able to do the projects that were required. And so it was not easy because the vendors want to give you the right information. And I had learned a whole bunch of different things at different webinars. And like I said, luckily, this team was super helpful in those webinars in helping us choose the right path and get the right information.
So I should also mention that the Accelerator has a certified service provider program for engineers and architects that are part of it. And my firm, the Collective for Community, Culture, and Environment, we're an architecture and planning firm, are part of that service provider list. So the Accelerator can also help you with consultants if you need them.
Mm-hmm.
So Kate, would you like to wrap this up with some concluding remarks? You're muted, Kate.
Thank you. So thanks everyone for being here, and especially thank you to all the panelists for sharing your really helpful resources and firsthand experience. I just also want to, on this last page, we collected all the information, and like Meta said, we'll be emailing out this recording and the slide deck as well, so you can see those again. One of the benefits of being a Bricks and Mortals member, I'll just plug that, is that you have access to webinars like this and resources like this. And then also we have members that are both from the faith community and also what we call general members. So all the folks you might be engaging for a project like this. So while it's super important for these projects, for them to be on the approved vendor list, you can also cross-check to see if they're Bricks and Mortals members, because that means they've been approved by our board, which is elected by the members, and they have signed an ethics pledge, which is also very important. So, please join, reach out if you have any questions. And then also next Wednesday, we're having our second faith-based affordable housing summit at Riverside Church, co-sponsored with the city. We have a bunch of great panelists. We have about 20 panelists. So it'll be a really great event. If you just scan this QR code, it'll take you right to the Eventbrite page. and with more information, along with listening who the special guests are, who are really exciting. So yeah, thank you everyone for being here, for taking the time to learn about this really important issue. Feel free to reach out to us, but very much the accelerator if you have any specific questions. And we look forward to being in touch and seeing you at another event soon. Thanks so much, everybody.